Third edition of Defo on 5, Jeff DeForest and one Mike Lubie. Lubitz, confusion today is my middle name because, and we'll get to this, I'm sure, if it's not the heat, it's the hypocrisy. I think that's a fair way to approach today's program. And what really is, I mean, one of the most shocking agendas I've ever seen. Really, are you surprised in the world of sports where something comes completely out of nowhere? Doesn't happen that often where all of a sudden a development occurs. I actually Mike Mayo sent me the headline there, and it was the article in the New York Times about the merger of what turns out to be the PGA, the Live Golf Tour, and the worldwide tour. There, I guess it is the DP World Tour. DP World Tour. I don't know what kind of factor they were, but we know that there was nothing but acrimony, hostility, and a lot of litigation going on now between the PGA and the Live Tour. And the general impression was the Live Tour, a bunch of blood sucking, soul selling mofos who defected from the PGA Tour, took the money that was being offered by the Saudi Arabian government in their public investment fund, some 600 billion strong. So big is this fund, Mike Lubitz, that when they bought a soccer team for 409 million, it didn't even begin to make a dent in the smallest of percentages of the amount of money that was available to these guys to go ahead and try and buy themselves a good name, which is essentially what the sports washing thing is all about. Now people will scoff. All of a sudden, Jay Monahan, what? Sports washing? He's a PGA commissioner. Yeah, we never said anything about that. This is a guy that was standing at like Arlington Cemetery, looking at bodies that were buried in various wars and, mentioned the 9/11 victims and the whole situation in conjunction with, we're on the right side of this thing. We would never do this. We're the Professional Golfers Association. We're too good. We're too sanctimonious to ever sell our souls to the devil. Somebody who would carve up a journalist and be guilty of, human atrocities that we probably can't even begin to account for. Now, and we were talking about this yesterday. It's kind of interesting because we were talking about how individual athletes are being scrutinized and actually being rejected by other players because of their affiliation, their home country, which they can't help where they came from, can they? In the case of Arina Sabalenka and some of the other Russian players, she's from Belarus, and the Ukrainian players were refusing to shake their hands and trying to, bring across the message that, hey, we can't even acknowledge these people. Now, in that case, I thought it was a very unfair representation. But in this case, it's much like the whole thing with the horse racing debate, where the horses can't decide if they want to be involved in a very dangerous and possibly life-threatening sport. Certainly a life-debilitating sport that over time is going to eventually extract its price. Like football does with players that, they used to hide those guys in the background, right? You think anybody wanted to see somebody bring a camera into Jim Otto's room, the former center for the Raiders, who, he was one of the most egregious examples of people who were completely crippled, even though they hadn't checked out, and didn't have the brain problems that some of the others have had, the CTE. Guy couldn't walk. I mean, he was finished. I mean, debilitated completely because of his career playing football for the Oakland Raiders. That was back in the day when, we thought it was funny that a guy would collide with somebody and they'd go helmet to helmet and they go, whoa, he really had his bell rung. That was really something, huh? Did you see that, Joe? That was some player. But this just reeks of betrayal. Jay Monahan, how the heck do you look in the mirror today? He had the commissioner of the PGA Tour. All of these players he had pointing fingers at the Saudis and the Live Tour players and saying, you bunch of scumbags. They didn't want him on the tour. They immediately expelled him from the tour. They weren't allowed to participate in any PGA events. There was some debate whether they could participate in majors, but the majors are run separately from the Professional Golfers Association. And here's the PGA. Did you ever get any hint that they were suffering, Lubie, for cash? I don't know. This struck me when I saw the New York Times article that Mayo sent us. I thought it was a hoax. I really did. I thought, wow, the Times is now doing stuff that the Inquirer wouldn't even think about doing, printing these false stories. But literally came out of nowhere. Nobody knew what was happening. Only Monahan And this guy Yasir El Ramyaman, or whatever his name is, von Schmenk, he ended up orchestrating this deal and negotiating this deal where the tours have merged, and I guess in 2024 it's all going to be peace and harmony. A shocker, and it seems like literally Monahan sold out not only his own soul, but that of all of the players that he had denouncing the Live Tour. Rory McIlroy, Tiger Woods. These guys turned down hundreds of millions of dollars to protect the integrity of the PGA Tour. And then, they're told in a meeting, blindsided by this, that, oh, by the way, we're partners now. Meet your new partners, the Saudis. What a story, huh? I mean, as much as I love watching golf, I don't know that I could ever look at the sport as the same. But we know that all sports are out there for the almighty dollar. We talk about it all the time when, with regard to television contracts and things like that, and flexing games in the NFL, and all of this talk about, well, a personal seat license is a good investment. That's one of Roger Goodell's favorite things. I mean, how good was it when you were a Jets fan and you could buy tickets for $2 online? But meanwhile, you were the guy that handed up 25,000 for the right to buy tickets at like a premium price. Insane. So we all know the sports fan usually gets screwed. In this case, most people are speculating that the merger will be to the fans' benefit, but at what price, Mike Lubie? I don't know. What do you think about all this? It seemed like the bottom line was, and this is what I thought yesterday, that well, geez, the Live Tour couldn't compete, so they bought the PGA Tour. But also, some of this centered around the fact that there was going to be ongoing and maybe perpetual litigation between the two tours and the two factions, and that Monahan was somehow seeking a way to put a quick and abrupt end to that before they started pouring millions of dollars and maybe billions of dollars into legal fees, trying to fight antitrust assertions and things of that nature. But I don't know, Libby. I mean, is that the most surprising development you've ever seen in your history of watching sports?
Surprising. I don't know what was surprising. I mean, I guess if you were reading the tea leaves, you could see something like this happening. They had a lot of money. They want to get into golf. It was a flaming disaster. Literally, the only TV contract they got was one they bought, and was for a network that no one's ever watched. Really, anything outside of like middle level.
People were pissed. Kids were pissed that cartoons weren't on.
Yeah, I mean, CW. I know they'll do some college football stuff, I guess, off of a Jefferson Pilot or something. Sometimes, I guess, but you don't think of them as a sports entity. No one was watching. The ratings were dreadful. Most people didn't even know the tournaments were on. It was a flaming disaster, but they had so much money. I guess you could see somewhere ending here. The PGA grandstanded so much, and they were so anti-live, and they were very out there about it. They were very loud about it. They were very clear about it.
They were disgusted by it. That anybody would consider selling their soul to the devil for the Saudi money so that they could help brand themselves as being, people that were doing things that were uplifting. When in the meantime, I mean, they were torturing people, murdering gays, had dissected the journalist Khashoggi. It was, I mean, clear cut that that this money was set aside to. I mean, much like, and I guess the people that fired back from the Live Tour side of things, what would cite that. Well, geez, NBC's going on the Golf Channel and, getting up on a big podium there and saying, well, you know what, these guys are losers and they're all scumbags and they have no heart and they, shouldn't be allowed on American soil. And, and like I said, they're standing in front of the World Trade Center Memorial while they're making these statements. And, out of nowhere, all of a sudden, their partners, it's insane. It really does seem that way. I can't imagine how they could have kept this a dark secret from the people that they had. I mean, they really, you talk about leaving a guy out to dry. How about McIlroy, Tiger Woods?
I was going to say those
completely out to dry.
Those guys left a lot of money on the table, and it's not their fault. They were trying to do what was right. I just don't understand the PGA winning. I mean, in the end, their ratings didn't get hit hard from what I know. They still had good following.
Seemed to be functioning just fine, didn't they?
Total disaster. Why are you now joining that? Because that's what it is. We hear merger, but they're not absorbing Live. From what it makes sense is Live's buying them like that. After all that grandstanding, all that talk, I get it. Everyone has a number, but within less than a year, like, come on.
Yeah.
That's crazy. And I get it. The major, which is what most of us really watch overall, don't really have much to do with the PGA. They're more under the USGA slash just a more generic
They
brand.
have other organizing bodies.
But still, like look, it's still. If you wanted to avoid litigation, fine. Then why talk all that shit? Like, they talked a lot of shit.
Well, and also don't have a completely blindsiding situation where out of nowhere this announcement comes and nobody even knows. I mean, how did it possibly come about? You had two or three people supposedly, maybe four, that knew what the hell was going on. Not even Greg Norman. He was informed just before the announcement was made. Now, I'm sure they all made out very handsomely, and you would imagine Jay Monahan got himself a bucket full of money. So for him to be pointing fingers at the Saudis all of this time and encouraging all of his players to do the same, and then turn right around and sell them out from underneath, there was no consultation whatsoever whether the players on the PGA Tour had any desire to see this happen. It seemed like, in spite of the fact that they had an endless stream of cash at the Live Tour, I mean, would the Saudis themselves have eventually just said, "Hey, listen, this ain't worth it. We don't need to be in this business. So, what's the point? It's a loser." Nobody. I mean, eventually, even the richest of people, turn around and say, "Look, we got to stop the bleeding here. This
Or
is
a
not a
loss.
charity."
Yeah.
I mean, they were drawing no interest whatsoever. They had a couple of good players, right? Rick Skepka, obviously, Dustin Johnson, still in their prime. You had Patrick Reed, who everybody hates, but nonetheless, was an impactful player still. A couple of others, and then a bunch of washed-up Europeans. And for them, it was a resurrection from the grave because their careers were about to spiral quickly downward. The Wiest Hazens, the Ian Poulters, they weren't winning tournaments anymore. They were rarely factors even through a couple of rounds, and all of a sudden they were worth $100 million because the Saudis just doled it out there and guaranteed money to play like 8 tournaments a year of 3 rounds apiece with music blaring in the background. But I mean, I don't know that I've ever been so surprised by something. It was kind of like when they hastily called that press conference to announce that Don Shula had decided he didn't want to be coach of the Dolphins anymore. And guess what? He was recommending they pass the torch to Jimmy Johnson, who he despised. Unbelievable. And you're thinking, okay, I don't know that was so much of a surprise. It was a surprise in the way it was presented.
Yep.
But it wasn't a shock where you had people screaming at each other, and then all of a sudden they're best buddies. And you couldn't have made any more, I mean, blasphemous assertions about the disgust that people had about Saudi sports washing money.
Well,
They did shoot back. I was going to say that NBC didn't have any problem, which owns the Golf Channel, didn't have any problem and has the rights to many PGA events. No problem televising the Olympics in China and Russia.
exactly.
So, I mean, who's kidding who here? I mean, as the sanctimony was coming from the Golf Channel yesterday, and Brandon Chamley, one of the announcers there, has been the most outspoken and actually deemed this on the Golf Channel the darkest day in the history of professional golf. And, that being said, here was NBC. They were more than willing. I mean, did you see a lot of stuff about Putin and the war in Ukraine during the Olympic coverage? No. I see any of this stuff about how China is essentially like now flying planes and buzzing our American troops, and warships are suddenly crossing the path of American ships. And you saw nothing about this. When the Olympic coverage was going on, it was like, look how wonderful it is here. Here's a tour of Chinatown. This is great, man. The food's dynamite. You saw nothing. So it was completely capitulating to sports washing, which they have, screamed about for the couple of years that the Live Tour has been discussed. I just didn't see them making the kind of inroads into the PGA Tour that would cause them to say, unless the legal ramifications of what was going on and the exclusion of these players from the tournaments and the whole idea about antitrust violations, which I guess also gets into whatever qualification the PGA Tour has as a charitable organization. Guess what, Lubie? It's all about the fabulous moolah, huh? But sold their souls to the devil, the PGA Tour. Can you watch the PGA Tour in the same light anymore and ever look at Jay Monahan and not think that this guy is a complete and total liar and a farce?
I mean, look, I'm not gonna be a total bullshitter myself. I don't watch much golf as it is. I'm not gonna lie. So, like, I guess this won't change much from my life, but it definitely if there was an opportunity to pay attention to golf, it's going to push me away from it. I like, and again, I'm sure I do things that are involved. I'm sure there's plenty of products in my house and things I use that are made in China. I'm
Yeah.
sure, and I am indirectly adding to it. I'm not so principled that I
You
only
buy a pair of sneakers, there's a pretty good chance they were made in China.
so Taiwan, whatever. So
Yeah.
I get it. Who am I to cast the first stone? Sure, but I also don't stand on television for months and months and months and months and months, calling the people who are doing this thing the worst scum on the earth. And what are they doing? That they're not American. This is an American.
Up until the day they joined forces. That's the thing.
Right.
It's not like, this eased off and you said, wow, geez, they're kind of talking to each other and it got a lot friendlier.
That's my thing is like, if you're going to eventually do this, then just shut the fuck up. Just shut up
Unbelievable.
and say, they can do what they want. We're going to do what we want. Good luck to them. And just shut up because, down the road, maybe things will happen. To be that loud and defiant about, and then go,
and right underneath everybody without any of their knowledge, this came as a complete surprise to most of the players on the tour. Apparently, they were screaming a little bit at Monahan when he made the announcement. Said, boys, guess what? We have a new partner. That's a beauty, huh? Unbelievable.
They're supposed to do, but Tiger turned down $800 million to now still be
your man Ricky Fowler, $75 million he turned down. To support the PGA and its principles, which now turn out to be non-existent. Marlins 6-1 winners yesterday. My man Louis Reins now. He's my man now. It's not yours anymore. He's my man now. Louis Reins 401. This is the latest the hitter has been above 400 with a reasonable number or a qualifying number of at-bats since 2008, latest in the season. And he's at 400 and climbing. He's picked his average up from 375 to 401 in like the last week and a half. This guy is a line drive machine, Lubie. A machine. He's Rod Carew in a Marlins uniform. It's great. Marlins winners now are 5 in a row and 9 of their last 11. And actually, as you were saying, they're like, what, 4th, 5th best record in the major leagues at this stage of the season? Is that possible? The Marlins doing a great job. So that's been a big surprise and a pleasant one. Luzardo, 7 innings pitched last night. DeGrom, wow. You see that story?
Yeah, the dude's hurt. He's just always hurt.
He's finished.
Like, it's sad, but
he needs Tommy John at like 35 for the second time in his career, and he's going to be out at least the rest of this year and almost all of next year. At the best case scenario, he comes back late next year.
Yeah, I mean,
5 years, $185 million.
At peak, the guy had a ton of talent and had really good pitching prowess, but he was always hurt. Was every year he wasn't hurt? Like, even the years he won Cy Youngs, I feel like he making.
Right. I mean, if you're going to pay a guy that kind of money, Texas Rangers having a remarkable season offensively, paid all this money for Jacob DeGrom, and he's El Finito. And you would imagine, I don't know, is there any guarantee he comes back after 2 years? And another Tommy John at 35 years old? It's been done, but we'll see. Anyway, he's OOP, out of picture for the next couple of years of Bizarre Story. Heat in Denver tonight. What do you think, Lubie? Optimistic? Pessimistic? Indifferent? Not indifferent, but no opinion.
I think the crowd's going to be amazing. The games don't start till 8:30, so the place should be packed well before the game starts. And I think, we're now realize. I didn't realize just how sick Caleb Martin was, and I didn't realize it was for both games. They have been in these games without him, and he was the third best player in the conference finals. If he can come in and add a lift, that could be interesting. And I think they're going to be really on it. And I'm curious to see again what Butler we see. If Butler's not only a facilitator, but he's willing to keep being aggressive and starts hitting his mid-range jumper. I don't know. I have a good feeling about tonight. But we shall. Denver, I know, is going to bounce back, and I know there's been a lot of talk after Game 2 about whatever the fuck they did to play so poorly. I'm really curious to see what we see tonight. I have a good feeling. I really do.
You've been optimistic all the way through. All right, so because you're thinking that, I'm going to say Denver tonight, and they go up 2-1, and the rhetoric changes completely, and everybody starts talking about what a bunch of scrubs the Heat are. I hope not for the Heat Nation out there on 5 Reasons Sports Network, because, we're going to have Scoop Skolnick out there for 5 Reasons, and his whole crew. Can you imagine? He probably has like 20 credentials for the game. They're the only entity that covers the Heat on a regular basis besides Ira Winderman. That's it. I don't even know. There's a Miami Herald even send a guy out there. I'm not sure. All of a sudden, everybody's on the bandwagon now, including us. All right, we'll see you on the next edition of Defo on 5. We'll expand on some of these thoughts here on the Defo Show. South Florida Live. You can subscribe to the network there and get our show every day from 7 to 9, and then it runs all day long. So if you're not available in the morning, can't sit there in front of a computer or your phone or whatever, or even plug it in on the radio, you can catch it any time of the day. They're South Florida Live. Become a subscriber if you're a Five Reasons fan. We'll see you next time. For Mike Lubie Lubitz, I'm Jeff DeForest for today's Hypocrisy edition of Defo on 5.